Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for Unlocking Communication Needs in the Early Childhood Classroom. I am Marty Hoofer from Keep Indiana Learning, and I am once again thankful to have with me tonight Kristen Parisi. She is the director of the Clark Pleasant Early Learning Center, and Kristen and Angelina Williams are tag teaming, for lack of a better word, our spring series focusing on early childhood education. So 2 weeks ago was our first event in this series. If you weren't a part of that, you are welcome to go back and watch it on our YouTube channel, and that's where this will go ultimately in the next couple of days. And then the next two parts of the series will also be on our YouTube channel, so you can always go back and watch whatever you haven't seen or refer to it again as the need arises. So Kristen, with no further talking from me, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for joining this evening.
Yeah, no, thank you for again hosting. I know that Angelina and I both really appreciate the opportunity that you have given us and that Keep Indiana Learning, that's not easy for me to say apparently today, that Keep Indiana Learning has provided not only for us, but for our friends and fellow educators. So we're going to start talking tonight about communication needs, because as I have embarked on this journey in an early childhood program, I've certainly seen how communication is so critical in the classroom. It can make or break a child's day. So I will not tell you that I have all of the answers, but I think the work that we're doing at Clark Pleasant is really changing some children's lives. And so I was excited to share this topic with you. So let's jump in here, and we're going to start just thinking through your preferred mode of communication. So if you are watching this on demand, kind of think about A, B, C, D, or E. Hopefully there's not a whole lot of E's out there. But what do you like to do the best? How do you like to communicate? I know there are times that I would much prefer just a quick text. Maybe if I need to send something to my mom, my mother-in-law, those are quick, easy texts. Talking is, I always tell my staff, if you are texting or emailing a parent and they pose a question, you give them an answer, and then they have a question back, that's when you need to stop and pick up the phone and talk. We have so many quick and easy ways to communicate with families, but certainly there is a time and place to just talk with a mom or a dad or a caregiver. So maybe you prefer emailing, maybe you're a good drawer and you'd rather just draw, or none. Maybe you just don't want to talk to anybody. Some of us have those days. I had sections of my day today that were like that too. So just a fun little way to get us started today. So thinking about what communication is, and I got this off of the Common Sense Media website. And I know when my children were little, that was a great site for my husband and I to go to and learn some things just about the media that they would be seeing. And I brought this in because it is a form of communication. All of what we hear and we see, what our children are exposed to, that's pretty important stuff. So it wasn't too outlandish for me to think about going to that Common Sense Media website. But they have a nice definition of communication. So the act of giving and receiving. I think sometimes we forget about that part. And sharing information. In other words, talking or writing, listening or reading. And good communicators listen carefully, speak or write clearly, and respect different opinions. So this makes me think of one of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey is to listen first, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And when we taught those to my elementary students, when I was an elementary school administrator, we always said that there's a reason why you're given 2 ears and just 1 mouth. So how important it is to be a good listener. But when we think about our youngest children, and especially those coming out of a pandemic, I think this is probably that area where we're seeing the COVID hit our kids the hardest. So their expressive and their receptive language skills and communication skills are really suffering right now. And of course they are. Like you could do all you could do in your home with your child, but we know as moms and dads and caregivers who raise children pre-pandemic that there's a reason why going to the park, going to a friend's house to play, going to Sunday school, to jamboree classes, those things weren't just about getting the mom and me out of the house and interacting with somebody, with another adult, although that was a good byproduct. But it also allowed my children the opportunity to hear language and to try language. And they understood that there's a give and take that happens with communication. And right now we're seeing so many children coming to us in our early childhood center that are really struggling to understand how to use communication skills. So reflecting on some of those communication needs and the planning that we do, think through, how do your students communicate when they're hungry, tired, or frustrated, happy, excited, scared? Do you have kids in your classroom that are doing a lot of screaming? Do you have children that are doing a lot of crying, hitting, kicking? We have that too. And I've always said that behavior is a form of communication. And when you are an infant and you're hungry, it is very acceptable for you to cry. But when you are a 3 or 4-year-old, it is no longer acceptable to communicate like that. But so many of our children haven't been taught yet how best to communicate their needs and their wants. So what are their communication models in the home? How many of our children have maybe older siblings who they don't want to hear their little brother cry and scream? So if they feel like, if the child is in the kitchen and they're crying and screaming, they'll just give them the glass of milk or get them the water. So I know that happened with our youngest. We had 2 older children and then a third. And so our youngest child, he didn't need to communicate a whole lot because he had a big brother and sister that would do it for him. And then think too about families who have children that are learning 2 different languages or multiple languages. And I know in our school district, we have a lot of families that speak maybe Punjabi, Burmese, Chin, Hispanic, they're speaking Spanish because they are Hispanic. And so that's the model that they have at home. And it's amazing, it's wonderful. But it's not the language that they're going to need to communicate with peers in the classroom. And so we're always telling parents, keep both languages together. So please don't stop speaking the language that the parent knows, if it's another language, and please don't stop striving to teach your child English also. And a lot of times that parents will come and say, I don't think I should keep speaking Punjabi to them, or I don't think I should speak Spanish to them anymore. And we always want to encourage that we respect their culture and their community, and we want them to learn 2 languages. So how about that give and take? I mentioned that a little bit ago. We do a lot to get kids to understand that communication is that there's a cause and effect relationship with that. And so we might be, I'm going to show you an example in just a minute of some core communication boards. And when we started using those boards, we started just during snack time. And we showed a child that if you touch this picture that says more, or if you show us the sign for more, it's going to get you what you want. And so that give and take, that cause and effect relationship, when children start to learn that, they begin to unlock that communication and what they need. And they see that there's a means to an end. It's worth it to struggle and learn because you're going to get something at the end of it. And then how do students understand that communication is a means to get what you want? And that kind of goes right back with the give and take and the cause and effect. So we've got some strategies for the early childhood teacher. And you can certainly think through your own classroom right now. And if you've got kind of maybe a notepad or some sticky notes by you, think about how do you model good language in your classroom? How do you expand on their language, their current language skills? You can do a lot of labeling, lots of questions, and then a lot of listening too. So when I think about modeling good communication skills, I think about a little girl that I was playing with one day, and we were both on the ground and we were playing with a farm. And the teacher in the classroom was just kind of sitting off to the side. And so I got down on the floor with her, and she was bringing animals out of the farm, and they weren't talking to each other. The animals weren't doing anything. So I started labeling and modeling the noises that animals on a farm or in a barn would make to one another. So I started just doing that pretend play with her. And all of a sudden she was making the sound of a horse. And then we had a little kitten come out of the barn. And so I was trying to label that animal was called a kitten or a cat, and it says meow. She knew what those words meant and had heard them before because she caught on really quickly. But had I just sat back and not interacted with her, and I didn't model with her, it was going to be a really quiet play session for her. And she needed to know all of what interactive play or imaginative play could be. And then I started asking her questions. So I see this in our classrooms all the time, where teachers will be interacting. They'll be getting down on the floor with kids, or maybe sitting at the table, and maybe they're building with the magnet tiles. If you don't know magnet tiles by now, you definitely need to get some of those from Amazon. I think they're kind of one of the coolest things that I enjoy playing with. And so I will build a tower with a child, and then we'll talk about who's in the tower and how do we climb to the very, very top of the tower. And then if I can find like a little, either an animal or a figure, a little man from another section of the classroom, and bring that little guy over, and we can climb the tower together. And the whole time I'm talking, and it's tiresome, but I'm giving the child all of those words. And they are, at least what I'm seeing in our classrooms, our kids are really responding to that. And then I'm just listening to them. So how fascinating it is to listen to two children as they play together, and they are doing what we did with them. So all of that, that playtime, all of that, that labeling and asking of the questions, they'll do that when you set it up for them. So I love those strategies. I think if you, especially the modeling and the expanding of what you're doing in the classroom, you can do that really easily with reading to children. Today, hopefully you got in a little extra read alouds during the Global Read Aloud Day. So how did you explain what was happening in the books? With labeling, I wanted to make sure to tell you, we have obviously different centers all around our classrooms. And so we have taken labels for those centers. And not only do we label the center in English, but then we also have it in Spanish. And then we put it in Punjabi, and we put it in Burmese and Chin. So each center has multiple labeling cards on it. Those are laminated, they're hung up nicely in the center, and every child that speaks any type of language in our program can find their language represented in the center labels. So that was something that I was super excited to help our staff do. And we just dropped it into Google Translate, and I understand that that's not the best way, but I love that our children are seeing the symbols of their home language. So there's lots of opportunities to really encourage language and communication skills in our early childhood classrooms. So you can set up those natural opportunities through your centers in play, in your daily routine with kids, in the reading, in the writing, but don't forget snack time. Like I said, in a couple of slides, we're going to look at some core communication boards, and that has been a huge time for us to bring in communication. And I say us, but really I have to tell you that I have some amazing speech language pathologists, amazing resource teachers, and classroom teachers that were willing to hear what we had to say about different types of communication systems and try them. And at first they were overwhelmed by some things, but then we just showed easy ways to introduce the communication board. So in a language enriched classroom, I can't stress enough that your classroom needs to be language enriched. So flood your classroom with early childhood books, good texts, fun areas that are cozy for children to read. Always be engaging with your children. I'm really hoping right now that my cat, who has just sat himself right here, doesn't wander right in front of my computer, but I think you're gonna maybe get a chance to meet my cat at some point during tonight's presentation. So our language enriched classrooms are responsive. We are using developmentally appropriate language. We are intentional, and we use repetition. So I want to touch on this developmentally appropriate language. When my husband and I were first having children, we talked about that baby talk and how we weren't going to use it. And I look at the language skills that my own children kind of grew up with. And I think, and maybe it's just because they come from a long line of talkers. I mean, they're Italians. But I really think it has something to do with the fact that we were always going to use appropriate words with them. Now, developmentally appropriate also means that we're not going to use words that are too difficult for them. But I think it's really appropriate to call things what they are. So, you know, a lot of times we will say potty when we're talking about going to the bathroom, but I also think it's really appropriate to say, do you need to go to the restroom? Because kids can learn those words. They can navigate some of those communication skills that maybe we think are a little bit too proper or too old for them, but I think it's really, I don't know, we always felt like we were going to do that for our children. And so a lot of that, then we take that over to when we talk about literature in the classroom, and having that language enriched environment comes from having really great literature in your classroom too. And so as you're reading those texts and you're sitting with children, how many of you have ever had to read a book 10, 12, 15 times? I mean, my poor father had to read Robert the Rose Horse. I bet you he read that hundreds of times to me. But that repetition then taught me how to read that book. And It happened with my own son with, oh, now I'm going to forget the name of the book, The Giving Tree. So, he listened to The Giving Tree over and over and over again. And at age 4, sat at the kitchen table and read The Giving Tree to us. He didn't read it, I know that, but he memorized that book, and that was the beginning step to reading for him. So as many times as they want you to read, Go Dog Go, and Are You My Mother, and all of those sweet, sweet books, read and read and read. And then obviously being just very intentional with how you plan and what you are presenting in your classroom to your children. I think that's huge for kids. We talk a lot at Clark Pleasant about the intentionality of the work that we're doing. We just did a presentation to our administrative team, and looking at some of the data that we have, they were asking, we've got some really great scores in different areas. And so we were asked, what do you relate, or can you pinpoint what has been that piece that maybe contributes to some of those good pieces coming out and data points coming out? And I wholeheartely believe it is due to the intentionality of the work that we're doing. I'm excited because I can see the next slide, and we're going to talk about core communication boards in just a second. So create those opportunities for all of your learners. Remember that behavior is communication, and kids need visuals, they need schedules, they need to be prompted to do what you need them to do. They've got to have the practice and that consistency. So all of those things are so important to our young learners. We do so much with visuals, and I'm sure you do also, but creating, for example, a visual schedule for a child is instrumental. I told you, see, you're going to see them. It's just key to the work that we do. And we know that communication and processing, we know that the parts of a child's brain that takes all of that information in, they're just not highly developed yet, right? We know those executive functioning skills aren't there. So if you can take that language away from, in the words, away from what a child is supposed to be thinking and processing, and replace it with a picture, you're going to get what you need. And most importantly, the child is going to get what they need too. So I've got to flip to the next slide, because here are our examples of core communication boards. Now, I will tell you, this is not what we started with. Maybe this was poor planning on my part when I put the slides together, because the slide that comes next shows an example of what we started with. But you will see here, we've laminated these front to back, and you'll see this slide that has the slide on the left has all kinds of core vocabulary words. So these are the things that kids need to say. They don't need all of the the parts of speech that we would want kids to eventually be able to say. They don't need any of that stuff. Right now, they just need the core pieces. Now, when we start to talk about different units, and we might have, we might be talking about, oh gosh, pretty soon we're going to be going into a unit on museums. And so we might include some kind of fringe words that we would put around the outside of the core communication board that would help the child talk about and interact with his or her peers that are considered fringe words because they are specific to the unit that we're teaching. So when we have a core communication board out, we just model constantly. So if it's snack time, I'll point to the drink and then I hand the child the drink. The assistant will, point to eat and say, it's time to eat, time to eat, eat. And they just keep going back to that board. And it takes time because kids, first of all, have to learn where the pictures are. But then they also just need to understand that once they communicate, they're going to get something back for it. So last year, we had a teacher who she wanted so badly to be able to use this. And she was just trying to figure out all the time, like, how is it that I can introduce this? How can I have it with me all the time? Is this really going to make a difference for a child? And she, in her classroom, was a little girl who was recently diagnosed with having autism, and she did not have a lot of spoken language skills yet. I won't say that she's nonverbal because instead I'll just, she's going to be able to communicate with different tools. And so I just say she doesn't have a lot of spoken language yet. So she was having just a meltdown. They were in our gross motor room, so they were playing and riding bikes and kind of in the gym. And she started crying. And the teacher was like, I don't know. She couldn't tell her what she wanted. And the teacher, we had some core communication boards, plastered everywhere, all over the gym. And the little girl, so the teacher took the board and just held it out in front of her. And the little girl typed more. And so, or she touched more. And the teacher said, more, I don't, I'm not sure what, we're going to go back and have snack. Do you want more snack? And the little girl touched more play. And the teacher said, oh, you want to play more? Okay, so we're going to do this. And so then she explained the rest of the day to the little girl and how they were going to go back to their room and have snack, and then they were going to play in their classroom. As soon as the teacher figured out what it was that the little girl wanted to do, she was able to explain the future to her in the schedule. And that, she came right down to my office and said, Kristen, I'm hooked. And I feel like those are the life-changing moments that as educators, we want, we want to do that for our children. And I can't think of a better way to help a child and to change their life than to give them a tool to communicate. So here are some more visuals. So the yes, go, please, no, stop, thank you. That is our quick 6. All of us wear a quick 6 at least on our lanyards because those are the quick and easy ones. So for example, I had a little friend who actually is in kindergarten now, and he was with us last year. And at the beginning of the school year, he was having some transition troubles. And so his teacher called just for some help, and I answered the call and came into the classroom, and he was under his table, sitting in the middle, kind of under where all the desks were gathered. And every time I moved closer to him, he scooted farther, under the table. And so I certainly could have crawled under the table, but I knew at that moment that taking away my voice was probably the best thing for him. So I held my quick 6 up and I just pointed to the go. And I just sat there with him. I didn't move any closer to him. I didn't use any spoken language. I just pointed to the go. And honest to Pete, the little boy crawled out from underneath the table and he took my hand and we walked out of his classroom. And he was fine. He just needed some time. He needed to take a little break, but he couldn't find the words to say, I need a break. So you'll see up at the top, that is what we hang in the bathrooms to help our children as they are learning to be potty trained. And then the visuals that we have underneath that, that's what we have up in front of our sinks. And it is, again, something that we use constantly. We also give parents access to a Google Drive that I have for you tonight. So, we want them to be able to use the same visuals at home as we are using at school. Okay, so I'm looking at my next slide, and I want to give you access. And so I will show you. Let's see. Marty, tell me.
Yes.
Are you able to see as I'm getting into my Google Drive? You're still able to see that, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead.
What I will do is also put a link to the Google Drive in the show notes, along with a link to the presentation. So they don't have to click all the way through the presentation to get to the Google Drive.
I love that, because I actually think when I clicked on the Google Drive button, it didn't work the way that I had hoped it would work. So
Okay.
I think it would be great. But if you can put this link, and I'll make sure to send it to Marty so that she has it correctly, so she's able to correctly pass it out to everyone. And please feel free to use, things that we have created. We don't feel like we should own them by any means. We use lesson picks, so anybody can put them together. But we really feel like there's so much value in these. So please hop in to these drives anytime that you need to. We've got different pictures for tons of different activities. We have, let's see, let's get that blown up a little bit for you. We've got, here's the simple quick 6. So definitely take that and put it to good use. There's some different bathroom cards. This is a great one for our classroom with children who really struggle with any type of verbal language skills. So when I go into Amy's classroom, for example, and it's bathroom time. Whether the child is saying that they need to go to the bathroom, or we are saying to them that it is time to go to the restroom, we always present the card. So we've got these, photocopied, laminated, and sliced, and then they're on rings. And so I can always give a child a card that says what I want them to do next. So bathroom, or when they walk into Amy's classroom, she's fantastic about handing them the picture of their backpack, and so that they know it's time to put their backpacks away. Same thing with snack time. When it's snack time, they pick up the picture of the snack off of their visual schedule, and they turn it in at the snack table. So we've got some of that. Here's again the bathroom and the communication board. And we were able to hook up with a community partner who is putting a communication board out on our playground. So I will make sure that the playground communication board is also in this folder as well. I think it's probably in my other visual folder. So let me pull that one up. And all kinds of things in here. So you've probably also worked a lot with social stories. So if you're not sure what a social story is, we write social stories for different social situations where a child might be struggling. So we've written them for what to do when, if you don't want to go to school that day, if you don't want to get on the bus at the end of the school day. What do you do when a friend makes you sad or takes your toy? And we always, when we're creating social stories, we will put in as many of the real pictures of the real child as we possibly can. So we just were working with one little friend on his behavior, and he loved when he got a smile from someone. And so we made sure to take pictures of his classroom teacher, his guest classroom teacher, because he spends some time as a guest in another teacher's classroom too. His resource room. We took all pictures of his teachers with smiles on their faces. And then we talked about what kind of behavior you needed to display to get smiles from others, and ultimately then bring that smile into your own heart. So I would definitely say every time you can use actual pictures of children, do that for them. So there's lots of different visuals and lots of supports in this. So please feel free to use as much of this as you need to. If you have not started with a first then card, this is the easiest form of communication and visual supports that you can give a child. So a lot of times we'll take a Velcro something and put, first snack, then center, or first, whatever. We always put, what it is that we want them to do, and then a highly preferred task or activity second, because they want to do the first so that they can get to the second. Those are masterful things to play with kids. So lots of good circle time expectations. This is also something that we start all of our circle time with. We keep that as a visual. We have some that have different pictures of kids. I teach a small foundations phonics reading group every day, and we've been doing this, since August. And every single day we talk about circle time expectations and what those are. So we also make sure that we've got our visuals in multiple different skin colors and skin tones. We think that's super important, obviously. So we go over eyes are watching, ears are for listening, and mouth is quiet when it's not your turn to talk. And we talk about safe hands, and then our body is still. So we have a couple of different versions of this, because sometimes we're sitting in cube chairs, sometimes we're just sitting on the floor. So a couple of different options there for you. Okay, so let me go back to my presentation. And okay, I've got my little friend here. I'm hoping that I can pull this video up. And just so you know, Mom and Dad were totally good with me sharing this video with you. Marty, do you want to chime in on anything?
Yeah, before you hit play, I didn't think to have you test this. You may need to stop sharing for just a moment and then reshare your screen. But when you reshare your screen, bottom left corner of the share box is going to say something about share sound.
Yes. All right. Let me go back to the Zoom buttons. Give me just a second, friends. Sometimes I feel like there's so many windows open. It's like, how do you find it all?
Yes, I would agree.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment.
There you go.
And you're right, I didn't click on it. Share sound.
One of the many lessons I learned during the pandemic, because we won't talk about how many times I did not share my sound.
I know, right. Okay, so here's an example of, so we were really fortunate this year to, we wrote a stabilization grant. And we were given a lovely amount of money to help stabilize our program after the pandemic. And so we were able to purchase some iPads, and then we got LAMP, which is a communication app that my amazing speech language pathologist really loved and recommended. And so we are using LAMP with this little friend. All right, give me a sec.
Okay, we're gonna be nice. There's more blocks if you need to. Boys, okay?
No, B.
Nobody. Good job, Ezra. Good job.
So I know that it was like, it's hard to try to figure out what exactly he's saying just from that video. But you guys, this is a child that I haven't heard his voice. And we have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how we can help him to communicate his needs and his wants. And he was able to type out, which, you know, like would he be able to type? I didn't know that. He was able to type out what it was that he wanted to say. And his speech therapist was sitting right there with him, and she knew exactly what was what he was trying to tell her. So let me get back to where I can show you one more friend.
Good job!
1, 2.
You want to do more? Let's jump, jump. Jump! Oh, good job. Look.
1, 2.
All right, so that was our next little love bug. And again, simple things that he is touching and typing, but he was able to communicate. Okay, Marty, you'll have to look at my screen real quickly. Are you seeing my really big mouse that's in pink?
It doesn't look really big, but I see your mouse moving.
Okay, I want to make sure everybody knows this. So when I am on two screens, I frequently sit here and I always say, where's my mouse? Where's my mouse? I'm trying to find where my mouse is. Well, I found out how you can go into accessibility on your computer and you can enlarge the mouse and make it a different color.
Brilliant.
And gentlemen, that was brilliant for me. One of those things when we talk about life-changing moments for educators, that was kind of one of them, which I think is probably embarrassing to say.
No, but I'm going to file that in that's a great life hack that I will be using when I get back to my office.
Right, absolutely, yes. All right, we've already talked a little bit about social stories, so I won't go into that too much more. But this drive, and again, we will make sure that you have access to it. This drive has got some social stories for you. And to wrap things up, this is where you can go on the Keep Indiana Learning website to get your professional growth points for tonight. I hope that you found this presentation informative, and maybe it just reinforced the work that you're doing and you're thinking, okay, we're on the right track. Maybe you found some things that you couldn't wait, that you can't wait to start trying with kids. I couldn't wait to start with core boards. And that was that piece that when I started at Clark Pleasant Early Learning Center, that I said, let's jump on this, you guys. It was one of the very first things that I brought up with the staff. So I hope that you can take just something away from tonight. On the screen, you've got my Twitter handle, I think that's what we call that, and my email. So please contact me if you've got questions, if you've got ideas. If I showed you something that you think if I could do this better, I would be a better leader for my teachers and for our students. Please share that with me, because that's why we're all here. So thanks so much for joining us. Marty, do you have anything else to add for the group?
I do have just a few things. A couple of my takeaways. I loved what you said about flooding your classrooms with language. And that doesn't mean just books on the shelf, which are important. That's something Angelina talked about last week, about having books that are representative of your kiddos and of your community at large. But it's more than just books on a shelf. It's the labeling the items, and just wherever you can put language. I was one of those parents that talked to my kiddos while they were in the grocery cart as I'm pushing them down the aisle. And I'm sure people thought she's crazy that I'm like narrating my grocery shopping, but it was just another place to put language in my kiddos' ears. I mean,
and we know that that's not happening now, because what do they have in their hands? Our phones.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you just think moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas. I know how tired we all are, but holy cow, we've got to talk to our children.
Yeah. And I love that you use that verb of flood, because that's what it takes, is just more words than you think are necessary. That's what they need. So I loved that takeaway. I also love those communication boards. Oh my goodness. And the fact that you're going to put them on your playground. So, I mean, truly infusing language everywhere. I hope you'll do a follow-up piece with us so that we can see what those look like once they happen, because, it's one thing to picture it on a lanyard. I mean, I get that, which that's also brilliant, by the way, but to actually then see it in practice and talk about how the kiddos are using it, that's fantastic.
Yep. And when we share these with parents too, we just keep saying, don't give up. It is not going to be something that your child uses instantly, but have them on your coffee table, have them on the kitchen table, have them in their bedroom, in their bathroom, everywhere. And they will eventually pick it up. But again, it takes you modeling all the time, constantly modeling. Yeah.
Exactly. So thank you so much for your time tonight, Kristen. Just fantastic information. In 2 weeks, we're back with supporting behaviors in multi-age classrooms. Cannot wait for that session, because I think there's going to be takeaways for teachers at all levels, because maybe as a 7th grade teacher, I didn't have multi-age classrooms, but I had a wide range of maturity levels. And I walked out into the hall every 50 minutes, and that's a multi-age environment. And the bus, and the cafeteria, and
all of our lives.
Yes.
Every aspect of our life other than your school classroom is multi-age.
Exactly. So looking forward to that session. That's on the 15th at 6:30. And then you're back, Kristen, I guess a month from today, March 1st, about accreditation. And even if you're not an administrator, I think that will be a useful session to help understand the why behind what you're doing.
Absolutely. Yep. And I just yesterday sent in our paperwork for our re-accreditation visit and got it all taken care of. So we're lining that up. So it'll be something that I am well versed in come March 1st.
Yes. So looking forward to these sessions. Like I said before, if you miss one, they are on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Keep Indiana Learning. You can also find your PGP points, like Kristen said, at keepindianalearning.org/PGP. So we appreciate you, and we hope to see you again at another Keep Indiana Learning event in the future. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.